So this is a drum sound that I feel like I'm always chasing, and I think a lot of people are chasing. This sort of retro, kind of vintage drum vibe that still has modern low end and punch to it, but the mid-range and just the top end sound like it's just teleported from the 60s and playing off of a reel-to-reel tape machine or something. So I want to break down how I approached getting this type of sound in my song called Noise. And this isn't going to be an exhaustive mixing tutorial of, how I got this sound. I'm really just going to point out the main points that I think add the most character and really separate this from a more modern rock drum sound. So I think the main characteristics that make this drum sound work in this particular case are the distortion and the lack of high end, as well as the ambience around the drums. Okay, so let's jump into this and listen to just the raw drum recordings. So I bypassed all the plugins. This is gonna be roughly, a decent balance, I think, but it might not sound completely right because gain staging with all the plugins, it's hard to recreate. But here are the raw drums. And now here are the mixed drums. So that's the main drum sound, and then there's a part in the song where it actually gets even more lo-fi and crunchy. So let's listen to that next. Okay, so there are three main things that I think make this drum sound work and make it feel really throwback. And the first one is distortion. So when I'm mixing drums, distortion is a really important tool regardless of what sound I'm going for, because it really helps bring drums to life. It helps control transients. It helps make them sound thicker. It has a lot of different uses. Let's dive into some of the uses of distortion here. So on most of my mixes on the individual kick and snare, I'm going to be using some type of distortion. So you can hear I have the decapitator going on. And that's really making the kick drum sound bloom. It's also controlling the peaks. If I play without it, with it, so you can hear that's used really subtly. So this isn't just something I do for, retro, vintage kind of sounding drums. This is something I always do because it's useful for the sound. Same thing with the snare drum. I have a decapitator going. So you can hear when I bypassed it right there, it really sounded a lot more dull and it came to life with the saturation. So that's one way that I use distortion. I'll also use it on toms. I'll also use it on, the overheads as well. I have decapitator going there. And all of that's used in a very subtle way. But kind of a bigger deal, I use it in parallel too. And I use decapitator quite a bit because you have so many different sounds and styles and tone shaping. And so with the parallel distortion on this kit, what I did was I sent the kick, I sent the snare, I sent the toms, and a little bit of the overheads to this. And all of this is getting crunched up in a more extreme way. And then I'm rolling off the top end because that gets really harsh. So let me play this back so you can hear just the distorted sound. And if I was to not roll off this top end, it just softens it, makes it sound a little rounder and blends in better with the kit, I think, with this rolled off. And then, getting rid of a little bit of extra sub frequencies that can make the distortion act a little crazy. So that's a big deal. And then On the main drum bus, I also have some tape and I have some tube saturation. And so these are both doing a little bit. This one has some EQ as well. But ultimately, I'm just building layer upon layer of distortion. You can see all of the drum kit and the parallels are going to another bus where I have a multi-band saturator doing more kind of tape style saturation. But yeah, all of these layers of saturation are kind of building that sort of crunchy retro sound, because with old school drums, you would be running it through mic pre's and tape machines and through consoles and through multiple generations of tape, because you would be bouncing things down sometimes, or you'd record to tape and then mix to tape. So all of the instruments would get more crunched up, and older tape machines, more so than newer tape machines, would have more distortion levels. So we're just mimicking that, kind of creating more harmonics, creating that kind of distorted, chunky sound, and kind of pushing it further than I would with a modern drum sound. Okay, so beyond distortion, another huge part of getting a retro sound is reducing the high end. So with older recordings, they just didn't have as much crispy high end as modern recordings do. So simple enough, you just have to roll it off. In this case, I did a lot of that on the main drum bus. So using this EQ, I kind of rolled everything off above 13 kilohertz, and it really helped kind of round out this drum sound and make it feel more retro. So here it is with the EQ, and I'll bypass it. So you can really hear it in the hi-hat. Like all of a sudden the hi-hat just feels so crisp and detailed. And this really helps roll off some of that detail and make it feel a little bit more crunchy from a different era, and helps the sound quite a bit. I'm tailoring the EQ to emphasize more mid-range in general on these tracks than I would, with a more modern drum sound. One example is with the kick drum. So let's look at this. So you can hear there's not a lot of clicky high end. It's really focused in the mid range. A modern drum sound might boost like, and really try to get the point of that attack, but that's not something that makes sense for this kind of recording. And similar with like the snare drum, I don't want to overemphasize the high end. Here I'm rolling it off as well. So I'm going to play without EQ. And with. So yeah, rolling off everything above 12K, 12.5K, and then boosting some extra mid-range too, trying to give it a unique character there. And all of that kind of adds up and creates this kind of retro sound. So adding EQ to the main drum bus, and then being intentional with how you add EQ to the individual elements of the kit are going to help make this sound more convincing. And the third thing that's doing a lot of heavy lifting here is the ambience. So I used a lot of spring reverb, and I also used some plate reverb to create this kind of space around the drums that just inherently feels, very throwback to like the 60s. And how they were mixing drums at that time, using chambers, using plates, using spring reverb sometimes. So let me play this back, and I'm actually going to mute all the spring reverbs and ambiences so you can hear what a difference this makes. So you can hear what a huge difference that makes. So let me solo up. Here's the snare reverb. So just using a stock plugin here, Springbox, which sounds really interesting and cool. And then I have the drum room. I also put some Springbox on there. Here's without. It's a really small drum room, so I actually think this really is needed to make it sound interesting. And then we have the drum room. which is more of a chamber. So you can hear that chamber reverb also adds this nice ambience and space around the drums in a way that's not really something you hear in a lot of modern rock mixes on drums. So now to prove my point further, I'm going to mute the ambience, I'm going to mute the parallel distortion, and I'm going to take off some of the high cut EQ, and you can hear just how drastic of a difference that is. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about this other section where it gets even more lo-fi. And to do this, it was really simple. I actually used Retro Color, which is a great all-in-one plugin for making things sound kind of old school. It has some extra wobble, both the magnetic tape and the kind of general wow and flutter feature. And then I'm cutting low end and I'm cutting high end pretty steeply. And just both of these together really helped me bring this sound even further back in time for that moment and made it easy to automate that. So this is another great tool if you really want to take a sound kind of further back in time and add some of that natural modulation that's reminiscent of kind of a broken tape machine. So that's it. That's the technique. Now let's listen to the drums in the context of the song. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful and it inspires your own music making. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions.